This is Copyright 101, aka Let's Not All Get Sued at Once. This is a review of what I know about copyright, what I've learned about copyright, being someone who creates lots of publications and digital media and has for quite a while. I really want to be respectful of people's copyrights. I want to make sure that I'm giving creators credit for what they're making. I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything that violates the law. I want to make sure that I'm following directions, but mostly being kind to people when I make publications. Disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is just a summary of what I have learned about copyright in my time making publications. So we're going to go through 3 sections. One is copyright basics. What is copyright? Why do we have it? Creative Commons and how you can benefit from Creative Commons, how you can use Creative Commons licenses. And we're going to talk about fair use, what it is and what it is not. Next, we're going to talk about copyright-friendly materials in terms of where you can find copyright-friendly materials online and how to check whether material is actually available to be used in certain ways, how to check exactly how a creator wants their work used. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about copyright at UVM because it has some specific quirks to it that you should be aware of if you're making publications at UVM. A copy of these slides is available at go.uvm.edu/accessibility. Wait, this is accessibility? Yes, this is accessibility. Knowing what you can and cannot use and knowing who and when to ask, that all makes the process of creating publications easier. And anytime you are making processes easier, you are making them more accessible. So let's start with the basics. Here are 3 recommendations for working with copyright. Check an item's copyright status before you use it. This is absolutely a situation in which permission is much better than forgiveness. When in doubt, ask. Lots of people create things and put them online and would love to see them be used more. They would love to become known as influencers for creating amazing things that get used a lot. So it doesn't hurt to just reach out to someone and say, hey, this is who I am. This is how I want to use your things. This is what I'm thinking. And they can always say no, but they can also say yes. So just ask. And then go ahead and document everything, just so that you have good records of where you found things and how, what steps you took to make sure that you could use them. There are 3 basic types of copyright. One is when something's copyrighted, it's actually registered with the U.S. Office of Copyright Protections. And ideally, this means that you need explicit permission from the copyright holder in order to use it. The second type of copyright is Creative Commons, which is becoming more and more common online. And Creative Commons provides specific directions you have to follow in order to use materials. And the third type is public domain. Public domain is a space where everything's available to the public for any purpose. There are no limits on what you can do with something in the public domain. Creative Commons, and I provided a link here, but it's creativecommons.org. Creative Commons is a set of copyright licenses that provide a standardized way to indicate how work can and cannot be used. There are 6 Creative Commons licenses. So Creative Commons largely works by looking at who gets credit, what are the terms of being able to use items, and who is getting the money. Copyright, to a very large extent, just deals with who gets money. Who should get money, who has to pay money in order to create things. And Creative Commons helps make this clearer. So Creative Commons, you can look up licenses by their lettered abbreviations. So for instance, the most basic Creative Commons license is CC-BY. And that means that simply the only thing you need to do in order to use this material is give attribution. You need to give the person credit. You need to say who made the material. The next license is Creative Commons by-SA. That means you have to give credit, you have to give attribution, and you also have to make sure and share alike. Share alike means you can't copyright the material for yourself. You can't place additional restrictions on it. You can't remove any restrictions. You just have to take the license as it is. The third type is copyright by NC. Copyright by NC, again, attribution is required. You gotta give credit. Who is this work by? And it specifies that the work can only be used for non-commercial purposes. These are the three other Creative Commons licenses. It gets more into this whole combination of giving attribution, making sure to share alike, specifying whether things can be used for commercial purposes, and then talking about whether things can be remixed, whether they can be altered in any way. Say you took a really beautiful photo of a tree and you're really proud of it, and you're willing to let other people use it. But you want to be known as the author of this photo, the creator of this photo of the tree. And you don't want anyone to dye your tree purple. The colors are perfect. You captured them perfect. So you might say that you license your photo of the tree using CC-BY-ND. So that would be attribution required. Give me credit for my photo of the tree, and no remixes. You can't turn the tree purple. And again, you can dig in at the links to find out more information about each Creative Commons license. It's important to note that Creative Commons licenses cannot be revoked. The internet is forever, but things on the internet, people may try to take them down. So your photo of the tree, you enjoyed sharing it, but maybe you're like, oh, I don't feel so good about sharing it anymore. You might pull it down. But if someone's already used your photo of the tree in their presentation, the license stays with that instance of the photo. So the license stays with the material even if you pull it down offline. And you must own copyright for the work. You cannot assign a copyright to someone else's photos. You cannot assign a copyright to someone else's songs or videos. You can't tell other people what to do with their stuff. So let's talk a little bit more about the public domain. The public domain really is, you can do anything you want with what's in the public domain. It's free for any member of the public. You don't have to give credit. It can be used to make money. It can be used commercially. It can be remixed. It can be dyed purple, shrunk, made large, sped up, slowed down, anything you want. When you're giving attribution, one of the ways that CDCI does it is that we have a page of image credits across the board. So, for instance, the Vermont PBIS report. Every report has so many images in it, so it became easiest to make sure that we gave everyone credit for their images by putting together a long list. Every image we use in the report is listed. We say where we got it, we say who it's by, and specify out the terms of the licenses. For the most part, we use a lot of Creative Commons licensed images, but in other types in other situations where people have said, yeah, you can use our photo, we add their image credits here as well. But you can also just put your attribution, your byline right next to a photo. This is much like newspapers do it, where they say photo by. You can do exactly that online. But what about fair use? Fair use is a good question. It's super complicated because there's no hard and dry, cut and dry definition of what is and isn't fair use. And the reason for this is because the 1976 Copyright Act specified that if we were to get into being more specific about what is and isn't fair use, like to really nail it down, that would potentially impinge on the creativity of folks being able to use fair use. So, in general, fair use must meet these four criteria. You can think of them as a checklist for fair use. One, what is the character of the use? That means, how are you proposing to use the work? What is the nature of the work to be used? Like, what specifically are you trying to claim is fair use? What are you trying to include? How much of this work are you going to use? Are you going to use an entire 2-hour film? Are you going to use a 10-second snippet of a film? How much of that work? And then what effect would this use have on the market for the original? So again, copyright largely comes down to money, honey. It's who's getting paid, who needs to get paid, how much do you need to pay? So let's take each of these four items. The character of the use, that means what you are creating. Fair use, in order to be able to check that box for character, it should be criticism or commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship and research, and parody. It's basically never for commercial purposes. You would have a really hard time arguing that commercial purposes would fall under fair use. The nature of the work that you want to use in your new creation. Fair use generally applies to things that are nonfiction, things that are scholarly, factual, informational, or published, and less so for things that are unpublished or creative. That means if you find yourself in possession of Nicki Minaj's new album that she has not released yet, and you really want to write a quick paper about the imagery of rocks in her new album. My goodness, it's so powerful, the imagery she's working with. Time out. You can't actually claim that, you can't actually incorporate that album into a published paper before the album itself is out in the public. It's just not allowed. It would completely fail the fair use test. And then the amount of the work differs between types of media. So film or video should be no more than 10%. So remember, we're talking about films which can be 2 hours long and internet videos which could be 30 seconds long. So no more than 10% or 3 minutes, whichever is less, of the finished product. Songs should be no more than 10% and absolutely no more than 30 seconds. Text, no more than 10% of a text. Photos and images, no more than 10% or 15 images from the same source, and no more than 5 images from any one artist or photographer. Again, you're talking about fair use. You're talking about not having had a conversation with this person, not having, having the person's consent to use their stuff. These are your guidelines in order to be able to check the box for amount of the work for fair use. And then finally, effect of the use. Will your use of a work mean that others do not have to pay money to copy the work? Does it impact the market for the work? Will the copyright holder effectively lose money if you do this? Fair use always applies when you have the consent of the copyright holder. If you're having that conversation, writing the conversation down, agreeing to terms, it can be as simple as an email where you're talking about, how you're going to use it, and they're like, that sounds great, just give me credit, like somewhere in the poster, that would be fantastic. Like, save that as part of your documentation. Or it can be something like UVM's own consent form, which is really, really specific and was drawn up by general counsel, and it specifies until the end of time, forever and ever, amen. It's really formal. So have that conversation with folks. Okay, so here are 3 examples where we're going to try and think about whether things qualify for the fair use test. Now, if you remember Cabbage Patch Kids, back in ye olde day, Cabbage Patch Kids were these squishy giant dolls that presumably looked like babies you would find laying about in a cabbage patch. They were all the rage. They came out around a big holiday and everyone wanted them, and they were supposedly, they're so okay, whatever. They were toys with, they were dolls. And then, while they were really popular, the Topps trading card company came out with Garbage Pail Kids. So on the left side of the screen, I have a photo of these Cabbage Patch Kids. You know, that they're dolls basically. The big squishy faces. And on the right side, I have a photo of a Garbage Pail Kid trading card. And this one is called Geeky Gary, and it's child with a TV for a head, surrounded by TVs, eyes spiraling, all goggleboxed out. This was the nicest Garbage Pail Kid I could find. It was the 80s. There was a lot of body horror in the Garbage Pail Kids. There was a lot of inappropriate, just plain inappropriate imagery that today we would find very objectionable in terms of race and ethnicity and ability. So this is kind of an example of Garbage Pail Kids. What they were released as a parody of the Cabbage Patch Kids, right? So they had the same type of facial structure. They had that same rhythm of the title of them, Cabbage Patch Kids, Garbage Pail Kids. They were really meant to evoke, as a parody, these Cabbage Patch Kids. Do Garbage Pail Kids fall under fair use? So you're thinking about what was created, the work that was created. Was it informational? Was it scholarly? Was it news reporting? You're thinking about the work that it was based off of. The work it was based off of were these dolls that were, someone's creative work that they had, released. And it was for commercial purposes. These Garbage Pail Kids cards were sold in packs of gum. And the amount is kind of, that's a judgment call. And then what was the effect of on the market of selling Garbage Pail Kids trading cards? Spoiler, trading cards who put out the Garbage Pail Kids, they got sued into the ground. So when you're thinking about documenting your fair use cases, you're thinking if someone complains about the way that you're using copyrighted materials, if they think that you've infringed on copyright. And so the makers of Cabbage Patch Kids absolutely felt that Garbage Pail Kids infringed on their copyright, and they sued Topps. The case was settled in a sealed settlement. It's still sealed. This happened in like 1987. It's still sealed. I couldn't find any information about how much Topps had to pay, but it was not like $5. So they just, it's an interesting case study. Interesting case study number 2. On screen, I have 2 photos of the late rock star Prince. Now, the photo on the right is photorealistic. It is a photo taken by photographer Lynn Goldsmith, who is still alive. This will become important. She took photos of Prince. Newsweek paid her to take photos of Prince. They never used her photos. But then Vanity Fair came along and they said, ooh, great photos. We'd like to license those photos for us. And so they paid money to license Lynn Goldsmith's photo of Prince to Andy Warhol. And Andy Warhol, soup cans, Maryland. His whole entire art was based off of taking photos, blowing them up really, really big, and painting over them, which is what he did with these photos that Lynn Goldsmith had took of Prince. And she knew nothing about it until all of a sudden these paintings were at an exhibition, and she was not thrilled. By this point, Andy Warhol has passed away, and so she is now in the process of suing the Andy Warhol Foundation for copyright infringement. And so, does the foundation have a case for fair use in terms of what Warhol created from Goldsmith's original work? Spoiler, we don't know. This is going before the Supreme Court this fall. So, so far, the appeals court has ruled that Andy Warhol was in the wrong. He violated the photographer's copyright because he didn't give her credit for the original image. But the Warhol Foundation did appeal. It's now going to the Supreme Court this fall. Very interesting case. By the way, the photos of Prince and the photo of Prince and the photo of the painting, the Warhol painting of Prince, you'll notice both of them have a ring of blue ink around the eyes. And that's because this particular image is part of the court filing that is around the images themselves. Court filings are part of the public domain if they are made public. We all know of like court filings that are sealed. That's not it. These are part of the public court filings, and then they are part of a screenshot from artnet.net, talking about this particular case. Screenshots themselves, you have to think about fair use categories, but in general, you are allowed to use them for things like talking about how this particular copyright case is unfolding. But yeah, you can see how it gets complicated. There are levels within levels pretty quickly. Fair use or not, this is the last one. This is Weird Al Yankovic. He has spent 30 years making music that are straight up parodies of popular songs. And so he keeps all of the music, but changes all the lyrics. So if you think about the amount of the work that's being used, it's a pretty large amount, right? It's the whole song. He's just changing the lyrics and the title. Is he making money off of them? Absolutely. He's certainly making money off of them. He's made a whole career off them. He's coming to the Flint Theater in May off of them. So you think along those lines. Spoiler. Weird Al Yankovic asks for permission every single time. He believes in consent. He talks with the artist. He doesn't make parodies of anyone's songs that he doesn't have consent for. Fair use always applies when you have consent. Consent, folks. But again, fair use is not cut and dried. You're trying to make sure that what you're doing hits all four of those tests for it. This is Aman Gebru, who is a Duquesne University law professor specializing in copyright law. And he says, quote unquote, basically, fair use is so complicated, it has to be decided every time on a case-by-case basis. So keep good records, look up, make sure you can figure out what the copyright terms are. Don't be afraid to contact folks and ask. And realize that the internet is very, very large, so you could probably find something else as well. All right, copyright-friendly materials. Copyright-friendly materials are those that are licensed to reduce inequity around copyright. Again, copyright's about money, and a lot of folks are working without the same access to funds. So if you're making copyright-friendly materials, if you're lowering that bar to have materials be available to be used, that's part of inequity, and that's part of fighting against inequity. And you can do this with a Creative Commons license, or making material explicitly available for educational purposes, or just waiving the licensing fee. A great place to find copyright-friendly materials is government websites. And everything that your U.S. government puts on their websites, that's images, that's videos, songs, articles, all of it is in the public domain by default. Your taxes pay for that. The exception is if the government website specifically exercises copyright. But as a default, you are allowed to use things like everything on the National Park Service website. National Park, they got a bunch of folks running around in beautiful outdoor settings, taking images and videos and making them all available because they're part of the government. This is one I made earlier. It is a video that I made using some webcam footage from a lake that I found on the National Park Service website, and I just sped it up and put titles over it, grabbed some music to go underneath, and boom, nice little opener for my video. It's interesting to note, though, if you look up this particular video on YouTube, so I didn't have to give credit to the nps.gov for their footage, but I wanted to because it's a nice thing to do. And then the music that I used underneath absolutely did need to include that licensing information. Was looking for Creative Commons specific music, and that's part of giving attribution. It's just throwing that credit in YouTube. Vermont.gov is one of the few government websites that explicitly withholds their copyright. Nothing on the Vermont.gov site is available for you to use without their express permission. So that's their right. They can absolutely do that. How would you know this? That's because if you look down at the very bottom of the site, you can see that they have an explicit copyright statement there. And so that's what you're looking for when you're looking at government websites to make sure they're available to you. Fair use or not. This is Amy Wheeler Sutton, who works at the CDCI. She testified before the Senate Committee on Education. It was live streamed and it exists as a YouTube video. Now, if we were to take some of the footage of Amy's testimony and remix it into a video kind of showcasing the impact that CDCI has on legislative matters, would that be fair use or not? Spoiler, I think it would be fair use because the Vermont Senate Committee on Education, that's part of our government, and they have put this footage up on YouTube. And if you dig into the actual link itself, you can follow the link here and go check it out. They have not included the YouTube standard copyright statement. They have included nothing about how it is copyrighted. I would absolutely reach out to their PR person and say, hi, I would love to use this. This is how we're thinking of using it. Just wanted to run it past you. If only because, hey, let's have a conversation, but also for PR purposes, because then you can send them the finished product and say like, here, if you want to share this through your own networks, please feel free, be our guest. So, you can work the angles there. If you're looking for copyright friendly materials, here are two good search engines. Openverse is at creativecommons.org. That is the Creative Commons specific search engine, and it will look for everything that has a Creative Commons license attached to it or is in the public domain. 600 million items, 600 million copyright friendly items. Surely we can find some things to use through Openverse. So creativecommons.org, the Openverse search engine. And then Unsplash is, I would consider it a commercial site because they have ads on their site. But it's just a search engine for images that are copyright friendly, and they've got a ton. So don't be shy about going in and grabbing some. Flickr.com, which I remember being really big in the 90s. I don't know, feeling old. You can actually use their search and change the conditions of the search so it only searches items that are copyright friendly. On the left side of the screen, I show you where the drop-down menu that you would need to look at to figure out, how to change the different parameters of copyright. You can see the last option in the drop-down is U.S. government works. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that Cabbage Patch photo we had earlier. This is the gentleman who took it. His name's William McKeon. And underneath each item, when you drill down in Flickr, there's the date it was taken and then the copyright licensing terms. And in this case, it's some rights reserved. That's actually a link. You click through, find out more about it. But you can also see the Creative Commons icons there. There is the little body, meaning attribution. He would like to be listed by name. That's William McKeon, who took this photo. And that's the share alike arrow. I wouldn't be able to turn around and copyright that photo. I wouldn't be able to put a additional copyright restrictions on that photo just because I'm using it. If you're looking for music, you can actually go to SoundCloud, where all the cool kids drop their mixtapes, and use their search engine to restrict the search results to things that you have the ability to reuse. There are tons of folks who are making music in the privacy of their homes, or in the just making music because they enjoy it, who would love to have their work used in whatever you're doing. They just want, attribution. That's all about influence, baby. And you can search by things you can use commercially. You can search by things that you can use for non-commercial purposes. And then once you get to an actual track, it lists very specifically like how you need to respect their copyright. A lot of times it's like, you have to follow me on SoundCloud. You have to link to my YouTube channel. It's like, okay, those are that's their copyright restriction. Heck, I can't make any type of music on using just GarageBand and a Casio keyboard, so I'm happy to link to someone's YouTube channel if they've spent 12 hours whipping up a completely awesome tune I would love to use for my video. Psst, yeah. And then it's important to be clear how you license your own work. At CDCI, we have a copyright policy listed on our About section of the website, and the copyright policy reads in part, the CDCI respects copyright and commits to using materials with consent, giving credit when asked, and being transparent about fair use. And there we've included the icons for the Creative Commons license that we're operating under for our own work. The CDCI licenses all our materials with Creative Commons 4.0. We are letting folks use it with attribution only, non-commercially, and with that share alike license. Creative Commons also has a license chooser. It's a plain language license chooser where it's like, okay, how do you want your stuff? How do you want your stuff used? Just click these boxes, and then it spits out a license at the end that you can just embed in your website, or you can just write out in text somewhere on the site. Now, couple foibles about copyright at UVM. Only use materials you have a license for UVM productions. If you need materials that are licensed that you don't immediately have access to, go talk to the library. They'll either find a way to use their existing subscriptions or tendrils to go get you an availability to use the material, or they'll point you to, they have a whole library. Did they mention library? Large library. Have a whole bunch of things in their library. Help you find other things that might accomplish the same goal. If you ignore a copyright and someone pursues you legally, you are personally responsible, even if what you were making is something you were making for UVM. Here's the scary stories portion of our presentation. A UVM staff member assembled a gallery of materials. They had checked the copyright for every material in their gallery. It's a gallery of songs, and they were sharing it out, and they used an image they found online to promote that gallery. They did not get permission from the photographer to use the image, and the photographer pursued legal action against them, and UVM was like, good luck with that. They wound up having to pay nearly $1,000 to make the legal action go away. Copyright, it's about money. It's really, really about money. There was a different UVM staff member who was pulling together an event for a department. They were partnering with an outside Vermont organization. The Vermont organization had licensed some photos from a photographer and gave the photos to the UVM staff member and said, please use these to promote the event. And the staff member put together a bunch of social media posts and went back to the director of the organization, of the outside organization, and said, is this acceptable? Is this okay based on your understanding of the licensing agreement you have with the photographer? And the director said, yeah, that looks great. Well, the photographer and the organization fell out. They stopped speaking with one another. Things got, like, there were other issues at play, and the photographer withdrew consent for their materials to be used in any way. And so it became a whole thing where you had to scrub all the materials from the internet because consent had been withdrawn. It's their right to withdraw consent, but there's just a whole bunch of places where more documentation could have been used, or how to ascertain, who was included in the licensing of those materials. Did the director have the ability to turn around and transfer the license to a different person? It gets really complicated. Anyway, the last part is that work you create while being paid by UVM technically belongs to UVM. Read your HR manual. But if you write, say, a book while you're on the clock at UVM, UVM technically holds the copyright. Songs. UVM has a particular quirk about songs. If you're going to play a song at an event, including an online event, like if we'd started this workshop with a sing-along to a hot new track, that would be considered public performance of a song. In order to do that, you have to have the license available for the song. There's a new group called Global Music Rights Group that sprang up in 2019, and their licensing terms are ridiculous. And UVM has said that they just are not here for it. The radio station here on campus holds licenses with other licensing firms for songs, and so there's just a ton of ways to access those. But Global Music Rights Group bought up a lot of song licenses for really, really hard-hitting artists, really big names and classic names. So off the top of my head, it's Bruce Springsteen, it's the Beatles, it's the Eagles, Post Malone, Lizzo, Bruno Mars, Prince, Guns N' Roses, Metallica. So that level of bigness. And so UM just says that you just cannot use them. That link goes to the catalog for GMR, so you can check if you want to use. Oh, Nicki Minaj is a GMR artist as well. Can't use her songs as well. These are just some handy links. This is UVM's official copyright policy. And this is UVM's media copyright guidelines as laid out by the Howe Library here on campus. And this is very interesting in that it is UVM's specific terms of use for their websites. And in a nutshell, they expressly reserve all right, title, and interest to, and all copyrights, trademarks, logos, patents, and other intellectual property and proprietary rights, including but not limited to any images, photographs, animations, video, audio, music, text, and quote-unquote applets, along with the overall quote-unquote look and feel, processes, software, technology, and other materials. They own everything. I'm not sure how this would come into play unless they actually decided to exert that copyright in a court of law, but they put it right out there. It's linked right here so you can see more about it. Thank you for your time. This presentation itself is licensed under the Creative Commons license 4.0 that the CDCI uses for all of their work, which is CC by NCSA, which means Creative Commons license with attribution for non-commercial materials only, and it's share alike, so you can't actually copyright it yourself. Find these slides at go.uvm.edu/accessibility.